What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel for another episode of the Ask Me Anything series. The second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs is just about in the books. We got one more game left. Game 7 tonight between the Canucks and Oilers. Should be a fantastic game. We got a lot to talk about today. As always, you guys absolutely killed it with the questions, so I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to each and every one of you who took the time to come up with a question and leave it on the community tab post or send it in on Twitter. Even the questions that don't get featured in the video, just know I read every single one and I appreciate all of you guys. If you guys enjoy these interactive videos and you want to see more in the future, then be sure to leave the video a like. That is the best way to let me know that you enjoyed, and it does help out the videos a ton. And if this is your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button. And with that being said, let's go ahead and kick things off with the first question from Hugh Barkhurst, who says, do you think officials should be required to partake in post-game interviews in order to explain controversial calls? I think it's an interesting idea for sure. I know officiating in the NHL, especially in the postseason, is always a massive topic of discussion, and it seems like there's controversial calls every single night. The only thing about this is I just don't really know what it would change. It's not like you can go back in a game and, reverse a call that was made. Maybe if NHL officials knew they had to address the media post-game, they would try to do a little bit better. At the end of the day, this is a job performed by humans. Human error is going to be involved. NHL officiating is never going to be perfect. I have seen some people throw out the idea of maybe the NHL implementing something like the NBA's last 2-minute report. I'm not quite sure how that would work. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the NBA's last 2-minute report, basically the last 2 minutes of a game, they'll go back and look at calls that were missed, calls that were made that were wrong, and things like that. For an example, they'll say at 47 seconds left in the fourth quarter of this game between the Celtics and Raptors, there was a missed travel call, things like that. I'm not sure how something like that would work for the NHL, but to be honest, I don't even like the NBA's last 2-minute report just because, again, nothing changes. It's not like you can go back and reverse the call. It kind of just rubs salt in the wound. I feel like it honestly just makes the fans even more mad. You're watching a game and you see a call that you think was a missed call or a wrong call, and then it later gets confirmed that it was in fact the wrong call. Again, it's just like, what does it change? What does it help? It just makes people more angry. So that's kind of where I stand on that. I try not to complain about refereeing in the NHL too often. Like, for an example, if I'm watching a Red Wings game, I try not to, blame losses on refs and things like that, because I feel like nothing's ever going to change. Officiating is always going to be pretty bad in the NHL, and it's just going to be something we're going to have to deal with forever. Kind of is what it is. Moving along now to the next question. This one comes from Hockey Fan at 1083, who says, what do you think the future holds for Valeri Nichushkin? As an Avs fan, I think the team really needs to explore trading him because I believe that they are unable to terminate his contract while he's suspended. He's been absent from the team in the most important playoff games of the last 2 years, and he's never consistently in the lineup from start of season to end. He's an amazing player when he's in the lineup, but the team needs to consider trading him due to his lack of availability and distraction towards the team when it matters the most. I definitely feel like Nichushkin's days as a member of the Colorado Avalanche are numbered. He is supposed to be under contract with the team through the 2029-30 season, but I'm definitely expecting something to happen when his 6th-month suspension is up, where the Colorado Avalanche look to move on from him, whether it's in a trade, contract termination, because like you said, it's been 2 years in a row now where he's been absent in their most important playoff games. It happens once, slap on the wrist, he joins the player assistance program, he comes back, and he's a beast this season for Colorado. 28 goals in 54 games, 9 goals in 8 playoff games before all this happened, and then all of a sudden he's just not available anymore. Obviously disrupts, the line chemistry that the Avalanche had built up until that point in the postseason. It becomes a distraction for the rest of the team in the locker room, and it's probably hard to rebound from something like that and really put 100% of your focus on the current series. And it was a series against a very strong Dallas Stars team that the Avalanche ended up losing. I know Nichushkin is a fantastic player, and when he's on the ice is a very important piece for Colorado, but I just have a hard time believing that they're going to give him yet another chance. How do you put faith, how do you put trust in a player that he's going to be available for you on a consistent basis when this has now happened 2 years in a row and not, during the regular season or anything like that, in the middle of the playoffs? The next question we have comes from Drew NYE, who says, curious who you think the Calder favorite is for next year. I think Stankoven is the front runner, but when you have guys like Celebrini and Alex Nichushkin probably having their rookie year next season, kind of makes me curious who will win it. I'm definitely with you on Logan Stankoven probably being the front runner at this point. He has the advantage over guys like Celebrini and Nichushkin of already knowing what to expect at the NHL level. He played in 24 regular season games with Dallas this season, and obviously he's appeared in all 13 of their playoff games as well. And in those NHL games that Stankoven has appeared in, for the most part, he's looked incredibly dynamic and has been a really productive player for the Dallas Stars. One name that really comes to mind that you didn't mention is Cutter Gauthier. I'm expecting him to have a big rookie season next year for the Anaheim Ducks. He did make his NHL debut, got into one game with the Ducks this season towards the end of the year, and he had an assist in that game, had a massive season at Boston College with 38 goals in 41 games. So he's another name, along with the likes of Stankoven, Nichushkin, and Celebrini, that I view as a top Calder Trophy candidate for 2025. Moving along now to the next question. This one comes from Mini Perico, who says, do you think that Boston should trade Ullmark? So I talked about this a little bit in the most recent video on my channel before this, where we talked about some NHL stars that I think could be traded at some point during the offseason. If you watch that video, then you probably know most of what I'm going to say here, but I do feel like Boston probably should trade Ullmark this offseason. Now, yes, over the last couple of seasons, Swayman and Ullmark have proven to be an elite goaltending tandem, maybe the best in the NHL, and it's been really smooth sailing with those two sharing the net as well. There's no controversy of one goaltender, wanting to break through and be the solidified starter. You can tell they love playing together, they love sharing the net, they root for the other to succeed. But with Swayman being an RFA this offseason and in need of a new contract, and Ullmark heading into the final year of his deal next season, I'm just not so sure how sustainable it is to keep them both. Swayman is due for a massive raise. You have to imagine Ullmark is going to want to raise from his $5 million cap hit that he currently has on his next deal as well, and I just don't think it's ideal for the Boston Bruins to tie that much money up into goaltenders when one of these guys, probably Swayman because he's younger, would do more than fine as the solidified starter with a cheaper backup option, and then you can look to improve the team elsewhere, trading Linus Ullmark. This is a guy who just won the Vezina Trophy in 2023, is heading into the final year of his contract, is a very team-friendly cap hit, is coming off of another very strong regular season. His trade value is probably at an all-time high right now. It was rumored that the Boston Bruins tried to trade Linus Ullmark at the most recent trade deadline, but Ullmark used his no-trade clause to nix that. He wanted to remain a Bruin, so if those rumors and reports are true, then it's obviously something Boston has considered doing already, and you have to imagine, given their current situation, it's something that they'll probably consider doing again this offseason. Continuing on now, the next question we have comes from 4U2NV Hockey, who says, do you think Marty Necas will stay in Carolina with all the big UFAs and signings they need? And if he isn't going to stay, where does he go and what does his new contract look like? And in regards to when the next episode of Deal or No Deal will be, it's going to be after the Stanley Cup Finals are over. That's usually what I do every year. We, do the Deal or No Deal from the start of the offseason, so when the Stanley Cup Finals are over, up until the trade deadline, and then after the deadline, up until the finals is when there's no episodes. And I'm sure the first Deal or No Deal of the offseason, there's probably going to be a lot of Marty Necas mock trades, because it does sound like his time in Carolina is likely up. Elliot Friedman said on 32 Thoughts that the Hurricanes and Necas aren't expected to come to terms on a new deal. Friedman also said that he believed for some time that it's just probably not going to work out. He just doesn't think that the Hurricanes are going to do what Necas wants to do. There was also something about Necas' father coming out and saying that Necas wants a trade, so it sounds like that's where things are headed. Necas just finished up a 2-year bridge deal with the Carolina Hurricanes. This upcoming extension, wherever he signs it, whether it's in Carolina or elsewhere, it's probably going to be one that he wants to be long-term and for big money. My prediction on what his next contract could look like, I would say probably 7 or 8 years and maybe somewhere in between 7-8 million AAV. And as far as where he could go if the Carolina Hurricanes do end up trading him, I think it's hard to say, because Necas is one of those guys who definitely could help a contender, but he's also still only 25 years old. I think there'd be a lot of rebuilding teams interested in him as well. If he is made available, I would love the Red Wings to at least, inquire and see what the asking price is. I definitely think Utah makes a lot of sense as well. I still can't get used to calling them Utah, but I'm going to have to. They could be looking to make a big splash going into their first season, bolster up the lineup a little bit, and Marty Necas would definitely do that. They have more than enough cap space to sign him to a massive extension, whatever Necas wants. They have an abundance of draft picks and prospects to put together a package that would be pretty enticing for the Hurricanes. Now, that being said, what kind of package could the Hurricanes be looking for? In a Necas trade, I can't imagine they only want picks and prospects. Carolina's a team that's obviously trying to compete for a cup right now, so if they are going to trade Necas, I feel like they'll probably want maybe a roster player or two as well, on top of maybe a draft pick and a prospect. This next question comes from Nick Holmes, who says, with Boeser missing tomorrow's, which is now tonight's game, how much do you think that impacts their chances? I'm not going to sit here and lie. I think it definitely at least impacts Vancouver's chances a little bit. Brock Boeser, up until this point in the postseason, has been their leading goal scorer, and not only has he been really productive, a lot of his goals have came in big moments. He's been really clutch for them so far, but at the end of the day, health is way more important than a game, and blood clotting is nothing to scoff at, so I'm wishing Brock Boeser all the best in his recovery. Hopefully he's ready to go and 100% for next season. News like this is always always really unfortunate, but I feel like you have to look at the silver lining, and this is now an opportunity for somebody in Vancouver to really step up and try to fill the void that is going to be left with Brock Boeser not being in the lineup tonight. If I was a Canucks fan, I'd be looking at, maybe one of the young guys who have been playing in the bottom six to really step up, like a Höglander, who's got just one goal in the playoffs so far. Vasily Podkolzin, still looking for his first goal. He was recently put into the lineup. Moving along now, the next question we have comes from Frankie, who says, where do you think Steven Stamkos is going this summer? Is he going to another team or staying in Tampa Bay? I know there was a lot of talk about Stamkos in, I think it was the preseason, where he made the comments about being a little bit unhappy with, the lack of talk in regards to an extension. But for me personally, I just really can't see Stamkos playing anywhere else. It's hard to envision him wanting to go anywhere else. He's had so much success in Tampa Bay. He's the captain of that team. Obviously, Tampa Bay, beautiful place to live. And from Tampa's side of things, if they want to keep their captain around, which I'm not sure why they wouldn't unless Stamkos is asking for an absurd amount of money, they should have the cap space to be able to extend Steven Stamkos. I can't imagine his next cap hit is going to come in at a higher number than his previous cap hit of $8.5 million. I could see him signing maybe a 3 or 4 year deal with a cap hit of $8 million. I think that would be fair. I mean, Stamkos, despite being 34, still very productive, just scored 40 goals this past season. So that's my prediction. As of right now, I'm going with Steven Stamkos to stay in Tampa Bay. The next question we have comes from Duck, who says, who is the most underrated player this postseason in your opinion? I think there'd be a lot of really solid answers for this, but the first player that comes to mind is actually Alexis Lafreniere of the New York Rangers, who it looks like is really starting to come into his own and break out. This is a guy who was criticized heavily for his performance in the postseason last year, going pointless in that first round matchup against the Devils, 0 points in 7 games. Fast forward to this year, through the first 2 rounds, the former first overall draft pick is point per game with 10 points in 10 games. Now, the power play has been such a big reason why the Rangers have, gone on this great run in the postseason so far, clicking at over 30%. But when it comes to Lafreniere, he's done the majority of his damage at even strength. 7 of his 10 points have came at even strength, including all 4 of his goals. He's tied with Chris Kreider for the team lead in even strength goals throughout the playoffs with 4, and the only 2 players on the roster with more even strength assists than Lafreniere are Zibanejad and Roslovic. If you're a Rangers fan, I think you have to be over the moon with how Lafreniere has played so far in the postseason, especially after his performance in the first round last year against the Devils. Getting into some questions now that were sent in on Twitter. This first one comes from Skinner Owns You, who says, what should the Oilers do about Draisaitl's expiring contract next season? He seems unmoved about extending right now. I'm actually kind of surprised by the amount of talk there's been about Draisaitl and his future with the Oilers over these last couple of weeks. I mean, I don't think he's really thinking about an extension at all right now, because all of his focus is on trying to win the Stanley Cup this year. He has a Game 7 tonight against the Canucks. You have to imagine that is where 100% of his focus is at. If we get, towards the end of July and there hasn't been anything done and it's reported that, he's still kind of uncertain on signing an extension, then we can talk about this. But I feel like right now, given the fact that the Oilers are still in the playoffs, that this is really a premature conversation. And I'm going to go out and make a prediction that when the time comes, the Oilers and Draisaitl will get something done. This isn't the kind of player that the Oilers are going to mess around with. They should be willing to give him whatever he wants, and I think that's ultimately what's going to end up happening. The next question we have comes from 31214 Hockey, who says, the big one, should the Hawks take Demidov or Levshinov at number 2? And also, really appreciate the kind words, and I'm glad you enjoy the videos. I know there is quite a few people out there that think, just based off of the prospects the Blackhawks already have in their organization, that they could use a defensive prospect, especially a right shot defensive prospect the caliber of Levshinov. But in my opinion, drafting for positional need is never a great idea, especially this high in the draft. Like, second overall, you have to be thinking best player available, and I think that is easily Ivan Demidov. So I think that's where Chicago's going to go. I think they're going to take Demidov, and if that is what the Blackhawks end up doing, I think it'll turn out to be a great decision. I mean, no matter who they take here at second overall, you're getting a great prospect, you're getting a great player for the future. But again, like I mentioned, at second overall especially, I think the main focus needs to be best player available, and I don't claim to be an expert on prospects by any means, but I think best player available, assuming Celebrini goes number 1, will be Demidov at number 2. And now finally, finishing out the video with the last question from the Rink General Slaffer, who says, were you surprised or did you expect to see the extension of Rod Brind'Amour? I guess I was a little bit surprised to see it happen so quickly after Carolina was eliminated in the second round by the New York Rangers. I thought maybe they'd take a while to kind of, assess the future and determine if they should make any sizable changes or not. But at the end of the day, I do think it was the right decision to bring him back and do it as soon as possible. Yes, the Hurricanes have had, their shortcomings in the postseason. They haven't been able to make it out of the Eastern Conference yet with this current current core, but I still think that Rob Brind'Amour over this tenure with the Hurricanes has proven to be one of the elite coaches in the NHL. He's consistently able to get the most out of the group that he has, in the regular season at least, and despite not getting out of the Eastern Conference yet, they've still won a lot of series and have still had playoff success. I feel like if they did just let Brind'Amour walk, that would have been kind of overthinking things a little bit too much there. If they're going to make a sizable change, I think it needs to happen to the roster, not really to the coaching staff, so I think bringing back Brind'Amour is going to be looked back at as the right decision. And I mean, hey, when it comes to NHL head coaches, we know that they can just be fired at any time, so if things go AWOL, they can always just fire him. So that is going to wrap up this week's episode of the Ask Me Anything series. Like I always mention at the beginning of these videos, I do want to say it again, thank you so much to every single one of you who took the time to come up with a question and leave it on the community tab post or send it in on Twitter. I know some of you get frustrated if your questions aren't featured, but just know I do read every single one and I appreciate all of you guys. If you did end up enjoying the video and you made it this far, please remember to leave it a like. It definitely means a lot to me. It helps with the videos a ton. And if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all throughout the year, be sure to hit that subscribe button and I'll talk to you all again soon.